You're gonna get a peek through it here, and this yard here. Well, you see more when it's the wintertime. Jeez. Wow. I'm Tim Hersley, and I live in Little Rock, Arkansas. We're in Stuttgart, Arkansas right now at Comet Rice. Well, the old Comet Rice. I mean, I don't even think I noticed the star up there my first go-rounds, but even now with that building gone, the star sticks out more, and then the proportions of this building remind me of like a Mies van der Rohe building in Chicago or something. I have things that I'm collecting photographs of or whatever, you know, I have my series of things. Industrial structures that remind me of the architecture that I shoot. Funeral homes, and you know, your typical oddity. When we came out through here and saw that by itself, I was like, wow, that's amazing. And it was sunny out, so I took a photograph that I liked, but I wasn't like 100% there. That I thought this was such a good location to shoot, such a good building to shoot, that you know, even though I edited the photograph and looked at it, I didn't do anything with it because I wanted to see it on a cloudy day. For me, on the opposite side, I mean, this is totally the abstract side, and I don't know that you even can pick up that there was a building there that had been torn down. I don't know. Maybe you can. I don't know. I'm not 100% sold on that one would pick up on that. What was here? But so this is the abstract side, right. And the other side, I feel like the footprint of engineers or the people who built it all on the other side, and it is still so It's still so interesting. So there's the two sides of it, and that's why I made that diptych of it. I mean, I would think that today this would be an architect's dream to be able to pull this off. This side. What do you think? Yeah, when I came to Arkansas in 1980, I just had that 9-year apprenticeship with a Hungarian architectural photographer named Balthazar Korab. He was one of the very few in the country at that time. I didn't go to college, that was my schooling. And the last 3 years of that, I was photographing architecture, and I developed some editorial connections in New York with the architectural press. That helped lead me to eventually getting calls from I.M. Pei to the Museum of Modern Art in New York, go to Bilbao and shoot Frank Gehry's project. So I was always really satisfied, but I was always punching away. In 1982, Progressive Architecture sent me to photograph Andy Warhol's latest factory. Big, rambling Con Edison building. Being there, I just started shooting other spaces, so I expanded it. I pretty much was given a carte blanche anytime I wanted to come by there, so I kept making photographs there right up until his death. I think they liked that there was an architectural photographer who took interest in their spaces. When I would tell people I was photographing funeral homes, I would say it's like the new southern landscape for me, abandoned limos and hearses and things like that. If you seek them out, you'll find them, and they're kind of interesting. You know, since these two pieces are from Arkansas, shot in Arkansas, that are in the Delta, that's gratifying for me. And like I said, that right in my own backyard to find those. And I mean, I kind of like that I'm not going all the way over to China to start a photo series or something like that, that I can find it right here in my own backyard. So, you know, that's pretty cool.
Before there was an Arkansas Art Center, there was the Delta. It is an exhibition that is the epitome of quality, of artwork by artists who either live in Arkansas, were born in Arkansas, or any of its 6 surrounding states. My name is Brian Lang. I'm the Chief Curator and Curator of Contemporary Craft at the Arkansas Art Center. The Delta is a juried exhibition. All of the works are selected by a guest juror. Over the years, the awards process has evolved to there being 1 grand award winner and 2 Delta awardees. You know, the Delta is not a unique exhibition. There are juried exhibitions across the country, but what sets the Delta apart, I believe, from others is its longevity.
What really struck me was, I would say 3/4 of the work was nature. Really either nature-based or focused on nature, and I wouldn't have guessed that much, but it makes total sense given where we are.
All artwork is a reflection of its time and place. Throughout the millennia, artists have depicted religious subjects, political subjects. It's a lens to contemporary society, and the Delta is no exception. We're at the 60th Delta this year. Certainly we aspire to 75 and even 100. And that, I think, speaks to the enduring spirit of the Delta as an exhibition and to the South as a region.
The title's pressure. Pressure as in, okay, we're applying pressure, right? And then also the pressure you feel that you walk on the scales and everybody else that's in this, sharing the space with you can see with the scales, so it's this vulnerability. But the piece is also about the person that chooses not to participate, the person that watches from a distance because that's an uncomfortable situation for that person. It may or may not be. That sort of area, it's as much about the people that don't participate with it as it is about the ones that do, you know. I'm Dusty Mitchell. I'm from Mountain View, Arkansas. This will be a good illustration of what we were talking about. When something looks like one thing from a distance, we're so used to seeing things sitting on a pedestal in a space, and then I've always thought of what would be a good object where you come up on it and you can look all the way down in it. And this one was a chocolate ice cream version. There's also a collection plate version. usually in my work there's some sort of give and take. It becomes about how I manipulate that existing relationship to create a new idea and sort of get a new idea across that, you know, they used to think about this thing in one way, and now I want to change that to where they're thinking about it in a new way. So when I was in high school, you know, obviously I was still interested in art, but I never was good at drawing or painting, never have been good at that. And so, but that's all that was sort of was inside me wanting to come out. So I thought, well, I'll be an art teacher. That'll be a good groove for me. I won't have to be an expert in any one area. I don't know, I was creative, but I wasn't sure what my spot was, where I was going to fit. And I ended up going to school at A-State, which was perfect for me because I started taking classes under John Salvist, and he sort of opened my eyes to the fact that you can make whatever you want to make out of whatever you want to make. That sort of opened my eyes to the idea that that's a possibility, a way to make artwork where I don't have to have the technical ability that I'm lacking. My approach when I was a student, there was this pressure to create, always have an idea ahead, and I had this fear inside of me that what's going to happen if I ever run out of ideas? How am I going to make it as an artist if I can't produce new ideas all the time? I'm older now, and I realize that I don't have to put that pressure on myself because there's always going to be new ideas coming my way. As my environment changes, things around me evolve, so will my ideas. And that's what I like about the Delta so much, is I'm sharing my experiences in a specific place at a specific time with other artists that are being influenced in the same environment. And the drastic differences in our work, you know, it's really interesting to me. And then even though it might be different materials, or one might be a photograph and I might have a sculptural work, there's always this common thread because of the environment that we're sharing, and we're sort of influenced by the same kinds of things. You can see it in almost any Delta exhibition you can walk through, and it almost seems like there may have been a theme or something, even though there wasn't, other than the fact that we live in the same place at the same time.
I'm Robin Horn from Little Rock, Arkansas. Talk about the Delta a little bit. It's been a really good show for me. It seems like that it has a prestige that's really important to the area. It has the same tone to it, or the same ideas to it each year, but the jurors are different every year, the artists are different every year, and it's really hard to get into, which is a good thing for artists because it challenges you to make something that's a little bit different, or maybe pushes you to do something a little different. This is the newest series, the industrial series, and then all these down here are slipping stones. So it's all about layers of stone. It's kind of a unique thing to be making stone references with wood pieces, but wood is a remarkably stable and secure material. It's really good to work. It's something that requires a subtractive process. The chainsaw is the perfect tool to use for these types of pieces, and there's just nothing more fun than running a chainsaw and carving on a piece and figuring out, you know, what needs to be gone and what needs to stay. The whole idea is to have layers of things that work together, that are maybe a little bit skewed and maybe getting ready to collapse. So Sandy helps me on the big pieces that I do. This is a piece from my Slipping Stone series, a big chunk of redwood. It's pretty typical of some of the pieces I've done in this series that are carved out of a single chunk of wood and made to look like they're separate pieces that are assembled. This series was influenced quite a bit by two things. One is a New Descending, a Staircase by Marcel Duchamp. It has a lot of geometry to it and really good colors, kind of my color palette. And the other is a stone that I found on our property that has a bunch of cracks in it that looks like it's getting ready to break apart. It just seemed like there were 4 or 5 layers of rock there that were getting ready to break. I honestly expected it to break open when I picked it up, but it didn't, and I thought, well, that says something as far as the concept of what I'm trying to do with the Slipping Stones.
It's learning how to navigate your environment. I mean, you find this has always been my belief. You find what you're looking for. I mean, it's learning how to navigate your environment. You know, what you're looking for is out there.
My name is Marjorie Williams Smith, and I'm originally from Washington, D.C., and moved to Little Rock, Arkansas in 1982.
And I am A.J. Smith, and I am from several places, but I have lived in Little Rock longer than I have lived anywhere.
It's home. It's where our children were born, so it's home for them.
And this is where my dogs died, so, you know, hey, it's home now.
I think if you look at titles of my pieces, sometimes there's some little clues of things I might have been thinking about when I was working. Sometimes it's simple things. It's just a red rose, and you know it is what it is. There's no meaning there. But for the piece that's in the Delta, the title is The Messengers, and the messengers for me are the flowers. That's where the message is. It was a bouquet of roses. There was about a dozen of them, white roses. But I could see that they were on the downside, even though the petals could probably fall off at any moment, but there was a certain strength there. And I could get that with that silver because it's so fine. I could just feel this form and how this is something that man doesn't make. You know, we can't make this. Thank goodness, because we'd probably mess it up.
I was thinking of my work, and I suppose my interest has always been drawing. I have always trying to tell a story. I mean, what is it I want to say beyond the physical appearance of the artwork? The work I'm working on now, that I've been going back and forth to for a number of years, Faces of the Delta. One thing I'm looking for is trying to find the essence of who that individual is in their faces, because it's your whole life. I feel that the faces and the hands, that's who the person really is. I look at the magic of their ordinariness, and I try to see who they are in their faces. I sit and we talk, and they tell me about their lives, you know, and I try to capture that in my drawings. Geraldine Welton. It was late one winter or early one spring, about 50 degrees. So some people say it's that late winter, other people say it's early spring. Jumped on my bike, went down to Mississippi, riding around in an area, looking for subjects. Geraldine was in a wheelchair, sitting in a chair on the side of the roadway there, in this area of Jonestown. I mean, people are so poor that they don't even know they're poor. but the spirit of the people, I mean, they're so welcoming, they're warm, there's the giving. I mean, it's like absolutely incredible. So Geraldine, sitting there in a wheelchair, you know, stopped my bike, got over, walked over, you know, and we started to talk.
And you knew her already.
Yeah, well, as a kid, as a kid, I recognized her. We just, started talking. She said, AJ, is that you? I said, yeah, it's Geraldine, And we started talking, and talking about back when. Of course, I knew as I was passing by, this is one of my subjects, So I'm looking for subjects, She's looking for conversation, but I'm looking for subjects. The conversation was fantastic. So Geraldine will be hanging in the Art Center not too long ago.
When we moved here, these trees were like you could just touch the top. I guess I'll just give you some history of this land. We moved here in 2011, and we originally bought 3.5 acres and the house. And we really loved the house, I think. First of all, I think it was like our imagined Arkansas, like the style of it. Like we came from Brooklyn. This is Rose of Sharon, which is grown as a beauty plant because it's lovely, but the fibers are really awesome for paper making too. I grew up in Red Deer, which is between Calgary and Edmonton in Alberta. So it's 4.5 hours north of the border of Montana. It felt really ambitious and got into an art program in Manhattan in New York City at Hunter College. And so my first body of work in New York was just like looking through garden magazines and just being filled with like longing for green things and like, what have you done to yourself? Sometimes I grow up to 40 plants. I think I've got like 10 because I have a lot of cotton left over from last year. So, and they have a lovely flower too, which is always so surprising. So this is Nankeen cotton. It's an old cotton. Being an artist also means being like really vulnerable and some very like financially vulnerable. Then just in the process of making art, there's like all this vulnerability, like not always knowing what you're doing, not always knowing what you're doing is important. So I always had 3 conflicting passions. I guess not conflicting, but difficult to make a life from.
Right.
They were art, gardening, and horses. This is a future garden. I know lots of people like to burn their wood, but piling it up and letting it rot.
Right.
I started making mixed papers because of the printing I was doing. So I was doing digital printing where I was combining photographs and painting and the paper, and so I was mixing the paper on purpose so that I would get these areas where there would be the white, where they'd get the beige, and sometimes I would get like kind of swirling or movement, almost like clouds or sky or smoke or something moving and changing. So the paper was like this kind of active background for the imagery to be interacting with. And there'd be these like great surprises, like torn pieces, or just like the white became like light coming out into the print. I loved abstract expressionist painting, like Franz Kline. Like I was obsessed with like the gesture of a mark made by a painter, like just like the power of that abstract expressionist mark, the confidence, and just like the lack of worry. Like I'm just gonna do this. And I just have always loved gesture. And so when I started making this paper and I realized that they could have this gesture, of water, of movement, of like kind of a naturalism. I just like loved it in a way of like abstract expressionist paintings. Just like, yeah, this is a mark made, and it's kind of out of my control. It's both made so intimately by my hand, every step of it, like cutting it, boiling it, growing it. It's so intimately produced, but yet when it's finally made, it has this like mark and gesture that's of its own materiality. I started making paintings based on memories from my own memories, like childhood front door, or like the back step of my grandparents' house. And it was just like, oh yeah, actually it's mostly about forgetting. It's like most of what you think you know so well is actually forgotten. Then I realized that what I was interested in is like both the experience of remembering something, but also that you like forgot, and then that like this complication between those two. So I was having a hard time figuring that out in just paint, and I realized like photography's always been about this like poignancy of memory, the like detail, like this is an exact moment, it's an exact memory of a place, of a time. Click. How do you create like this atmosphere of connection and like history of daily lives lived? And so I started taking photographs and blending them with paintings, where it became like the photograph was the memory and the painting was the forgetting. Kind of funny to have like one thing that's just like this narrative, like forgetting and memory and relationship to objects, and the relationship between painting and photography, and how they can play off of each other. My connection to place and my thinking about place isn't just like about this season or this moment, but like the history of this land, the history of this specific place, and how my life or the lives of other people have like left a mark. And I think gardeners or farmers or planters do think about that, because when you plant a tree, the action of planting a tree is to change the landscape for maybe years and years. In grade 11, I think we had to write this like, imagine your ideal life, like this like.
It's not heavy or anything.
No, like it's like a humanities project, like as though someone who's like 14, 15 knows what their ideal life.
Right.
But I actually wrote this, like I wrote that I wanted to make art, that I wanted to have horses, and I wanted to have a family. But now that I've arrived, what to do with it?
So once again, like printmaking is a challenge because you have creativity, but it's kind of messy, but also you're trying to get it to be neat at the same time. One last time through the press. So this is tiring, but there's something just so enjoyable about being able to make art and finding the way that you really love to do it. My name is Tammy Harrington. I'm originally from Sioux Falls, South Dakota. All right, now here's the magical part, you hope. I'm also a child of immigrants, so really I identify with being from South Dakota, but I'll take the tape off so we can just pull off the piece, see what it's doing. My parents are from Hong Kong, and now I live in Russellville, Arkansas. Here's the piece. Here's my little kit. Just the different things I need. Mostly it's just this X-Acto knife and like a million blades. What I like using myself, or I guess exploring who I am as the self, especially like when I mentioned introducing myself, I'm from South Dakota and I am an American, but yet I'm not an American, because if you look at me, I'm very Chinese. And so, but yet, if you listen to me talk, I'm very much an American. So I was trying to figure out, how do I figure out what that means to me? And it really taught me how to, know more about who I was. And so I really liked using that subject matter and continuing it. So I just started, I did the paper cuts. This is a way for me to explore my Chinese background, but in a very graphic way that I identified with. And so I did a lot of more traditional interpretations of, dragons and phoenixes and other flowers and things like that in Chinese culture. But talking with some of my friends and colleagues, they suggested, well, maybe you could do more layering and incorporate more of yourself in it. So that's why I started printing onto paper and then cutting it. And I thought that was a lot more, exciting. And it's been successful for me. I've gotten into a few shows. I was fortunate enough to get into the Delta with that as well. So I'm excited about the possibilities that I can do mixing media. So not being just strictly a printmaker, but using prints as part of my message. So I think that's very, talking about, transforming and changing, because we're not the same people. We're not the same artists we were 20 years ago. I'm pretty excited to get into the Delta this year. This is my first time, and it's made it even more awesome that my husband's also in it at the same time, because we really are just excited whenever we have successes with each other.
I am Neil Harrington, and I'm from Rapid City, South Dakota. And I've lived in Arkansas 17 years. And I can just do this action all day long, man. I don't know, it's just something that's pleasing. You got the radio going and you do this for a while, take a break and sit back and look and see. I guess with my work, I'm really fascinated by mythology and music and the tall tales, kind of stories that go on mythology, and kind of creating my own, not just taking what's already out there. And so I call this series I've been working on for a few years, The Bootlegger's Ballads. I wanted to be a comic book artist. What I realized, what I knew I really wanted to do, and I think a lot of comic book artists want this too, is I wanted to just draw the covers. And so if I could just draw the covers, that would be great.
That's what makes Neil so unique, is he combines the graphicness of
I gotta put on my apron.
the illustration, but yet he's able to temper it with this painting.
And my Greatest Dad apron makes me quite unique next to other guys that are barbecuing in it. I do ink washes in my apron. And this was really Tammy's idea. I have to give her the credit for it. But so I just take a bamboo brush, and I believe these are squirrel hair. That's what I think.
Yeah.
Possibly. We're gonna pretend. These are squirrel hair from the Ozarks, but somehow made in Japan. I don't think they're not.
This, with the point where we're at right now, took 20 years.
Yeah, it took a long time to find my
to get
voice.
to this point.
Yeah.
Because I know that Neil is always worried about, with his Bootlegger Ballad, how far can he sustain the story of this gentleman and his adventures in the Ozarks to where it's still visually
Not repeating
interesting.
Yourself. Oh, he already did one like that. You want to push that on and keep it fresh. But you almost have to give yourself some kind of guidelines to push against. Because if you can just do whatever you want, it doesn't matter. I feel like you have to set up your own boundaries and work between that.
Because is there a certain point where Neil is just going to put that to bed and now he's moved on to something else? Or will that always live with him?
I don't know.
I think it's funny that the Bootlegger Ballad person is not Neil, but yet it could be Neil at the same time. but it really has nothing to do with him as a person. But I don't know. Is it with something to do with you as a person?
I don't know.
Is it your alter
It's a
ego?
thinner guy.
Because I do self-portraits. That's mostly what I do. To some extent, Neil does that as well.
Well, I tease Tammy because I feel a lot of times her work is very sad.
I suppose it's just maybe serious.
Yeah. Usually I'm just listening to music and just kind of feeling the zone, man. And that's the best feeling. Because time passes, you'll suddenly look at the clock and go, God, I've been doing this for 2 hours. I better eat, or I gotta go get the kids. So like you have to set timers, because all time just doesn't exist, you know. Western time doesn't exist in the studio, because it's pure fun. What also drew me to creating art and creating comic books is you can control that. And if you ever think about life, you can't control anything in life. I can control exactly what happens in all these things. And it's very freeing, and it makes me feel safe. If you grew up around here, I don't know if you'll notice the differences that I'll notice. And there's a lot of similarities. I mean, I'm not from a huge city. I'm from the second largest town in South Dakota, which is not a great big place either. It's a lot like Arkansas. It's just a little bit different, really, and just more northern. But some of my favorite artists in music and visual art didn't really come from the area they're associated with. John Fogerty from Creedence Clearwater Revival, he wrote all those songs about swamps in Southern California. I mean, that guy's he's from San Diego. You know, he'd never been to a swamp. He'll tell you that. But does that mean they're not good swamp songs? So I at least live here.
I started out as a photographer, photographing place, and I still do some of that. But now that's more a way that I first explore an area, maybe. Try to see a place a little bit differently.
I don't know how much you keep up with the graffiti scene around Little Rock, but there's a newer crop. I mean, you know, it used to be junk food junkies were the ones to look for, but there's a whole new crop coming up. So one of the first projects that I worked on when I moved to Little Rock, I moved here in 2006. It was the year when the murder rate shot up, and I was brand new to the city. And so when I drive through the city, I often see the landscape in these different ways. Just here on the other side of the interstate overpass, there was a lady who came out on her front porch and saw the body laying on the side of the road here. I think about all the thousands of people that travel across this overpass every day and how they are largely unaware of what is going on literally underneath the overpass. I noticed lots of evictions as I was driving around, and I wanted some way to bring that, for people to be able to see that firsthand. And so I decided to make a quilt of them. I think we're often blind to the fact that evictions are going on all around us all the time, and what we do get to see is what is actually left behind there. And then it's gone. It's as if those people had never lived there, and as if that part of their life, it is erased in some ways. When I had the original idea for the installation, I thought I would go out at a specific time of month to find evictions, right? The middle of the month, maybe the 15th, maybe that's the eviction date, or towards the end of the month when they're being evicted so somebody else can move in the first of the month. But what I found was that the time of the month did not matter so much as the weather. What I ended up finding out was that after a long period of rain, when it clears up for a couple of days, that's when I would find the most evictions. I'm assuming because they had to work while the weather was good, and so usually after a long wet spell, I would go out and find that more evictions had occurred. I learned to quilt a little bit when my daughter was born in order to, make a few quilts for her. And then this project came along. The center of it, it has a medallion, a middle part that is bright lime green. Because there was a building in the same neighborhood just about a block or two away. It used to be a nightclub. So the quilt is really a reference to that particular building just down the street from where the eviction occurred. I was a bit hesitant in the beginning to about gathering these things, and I've tried to always make sure that I wait until I know that no one is coming back for these things, because you find not only clothes and furniture, but I've found family photo albums and things that seem very personal, and that I don't know, I want the people to have those, and yet I know that the garbage truck is close behind me, so I try to salvage them in some way. All of this was bound to be thrown away, but it was also this physical record of someone's home, someone's life, and to be able to take that loss and make it into something that carries this idea of safety and warmth and home. I find that my work always takes me to those places that are overlooked or avoided, and trying to figure out what that place is and who I am in that place to some extent. But also to see that place in a new way, and maybe even help someone else see that place in a new way. I didn't move to Little Rock intending to stay for 10 years, longer. But it's very much home now, and I think sort of coming to terms with this being the place where I live has allowed me to do a different kind of work here, that I'm not just passing through, that I have a deep connection to this city.
I'm Lisa Kranichfeld. I'm from Little Rock, born and raised. I initially started cutting off the faces because it all started with portraits, and I really was focusing on like facial expressions in a subtle and not so subtle way, mixed, like a lot of different mixed emotions, just through a face. And so I got kind of bored with that and decided, well, how can I get all these strong emotions across without a face? And the figures that I draw are very intentional in their poses. They're very aggressive and strong and confrontational, which women are not depicted as either most often, especially historically. I like to think of them as just beings that have wants and desires and goals and use their body language to tell those stories. And those specific things are up to you to interpret too, because they're very loose and easily ambiguous. And so I kind of like that. There's a term back from my biology years, there's a term about evolution called punctuated equilibrium, which is where evolution happens when there's a catastrophic event and it happens very fast. A lot of people think evolution is just this really slow moving thing. But I think we're in a punctuated equilibrium right now when it comes to women. Things are happening that are making it happen very fast. And all these protests have been kind of really energizing and inspirational too for my work. So my work is kind of commenting on all those things that are happening right now. So I always start with the ink, and it has a life of its own. Like once it hits water, it just explodes. And so however it explodes at that moment is kind of the impetus for the rest of the work. And so I really like to make a lot of patterns fit together that you wouldn't think would fit together. And so that particular piece has a lot of reds and greens, a lot of different reds and greens that kind of play off of each other. I really like to put complementary colors next to each other just because it creates so much energy in a piece. And so that one is red and green. And then that piece is also the first piece I'd ever done where I collaged cyanotypes into something in the interior. So in that case, it's the rug in that interior. So there are two kinds of snakes that are kind of entwined where they don't really look like snakes. They look more like a pattern in the rug, but when you look closer, they're like recognizably snakes that you can't unsee. And then the piece is called New Skin, referencing those snakes. You know, when snakes grow and change, they shed their skin, or trying to shed that old skin of domesticity and passiveness, and because it's so ingrained in society that women should be that way. I'm a very introverted person, naturally. I think part of the reason I gravitated to art is because I don't like talking very much. Yeah. And you have to realize, I guess, that your art takes a life of its own once you're finished making it, and people will get a different story every time they look at it that may not be anything what you thought it would be, which I think is also part of the fun of making art. You're making this like being that has its own life after you create it. Representation really does matter. You want to see yourself in positions, you know, that appeal to you. And if you don't, it's a deterrent, especially if you're a young child. It's sometimes like a little girl that had that same skin color and braids just saw that painting recently at an art fair, and she loved it, and I love that she loved it because she saw herself in it, and that's really powerful.
I want to share with you the opening remarks from the catalog that appeared at the first Delta exhibition, written by William or Bill Stedman, the director. He said, "In launching this exhibition, I hoped our efforts would stir interest among artists, collectors, and museums throughout the country,
and the many visitors here and elsewhere. If we have made mistakes, and I am certain that we have, it is to be hoped that with future exhibitions we will be able to correct these and improve upon the original idea. I feel deep interest and concern for the Delta Art Annual's success and continuity and its service to the artists in the Delta region. And certainly with our celebrating 60 years today, I think Bill Stedman and this community can be proud of the rich history and legacy that the Delta provides.
My name is Kevin Cole. I'm from Pine Bluff, Arkansas. I'm picking the award winners for the 61st Delta exhibition.
My name is Sandra Sell. I live in Little Rock. The piece that I got into the Delta is called Woodline. I've been trying to get in the Delta for 10 years, and I almost didn't want to tell anybody when I found out I got in, because it's like, everybody else is like, no, I didn't get in. Oh, sorry. That's usually me, but this time I got in and I'm excited.